Hello, 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 y'all. I am fortunate enough to be here with Miss Lynette. And as you all know, she's here for a reason. So, Lynette, what the heck you doing here today? And who the heck are you?
Okay, that's a cool opening. First of all, thank you so much for sharing your audience with me. It's always an honor. And who am I? I'm Lynette Louise. I'm a doctor. I have a doctorate in science, but my primary thing is neurofeedback. I travel the globe and work with biofeedback for the brain and have been called the brain broad because I'm a brain structural functional changer. I work with behavior and I take the stage and try and share that. So I'm here because you asked me to be here. And, it's always good to share some of your journey with people. You never know who you'll help. But yeah, so I work abroad, I work at home, and I'm trying to retire, but people don't want me to, and that's me.
And so I think what you specialize in is not a college degree. It's not a kind of standard thing that someone just happens to fall upon. What is your story? How did you get to where you are now to kind of be a subject matter expert in what you are today?
Okay, so I think because your podcast is focused for speakers, I'm going to shorten that answer and elongate the speaking answer. So I adopted a bunch of multiply handicapped children way back in, I don't know, the late 80s. And so I had 6 multiply handicapped children that I had to work with and figure out, and the world didn't know the answers. And I tried doing what I was taught to do by the experts of the time. It felt very abusive back then with severely handicapped, especially. And oh gosh, it's so hard to know what words to trip over. A lot of people are going to type you. She shouldn't have said handicap. But way back then, we had much harsher terms for everything. We used the term retarded. We used all these terms that we now try to avoid. At any rate, back then, there was a belief in the refrigerator mother syndrome, which is the mother wasn't loving enough, so therefore you become autistic and hide inside your head. And there was a belief in slapping, tying down, all kinds of very cruel behavioral techniques that, as a parent, especially an adoptive parent, because when you adopt, you go into it thinking, I'm going to change this. I'm going to make this child feel loved no matter what came before. And so to be told that you have to behave that way was really challenging for me. And I would try for a few days and sometimes a week, and then I'd feel horrible and guilty. And so I went on the path of learning, creating the answers, experimenting with different ways of addressing behavior, and taking classes in, behavior modification, ABA, sunrise play therapy, floor time play therapy, like all kinds of things. And slowly started developing a style that resonated with me. And I still was lurking. And then while training and getting certified in sunrise play therapy, I came across an article about neurofeedback, which is biofeedback for the brain. And I knew, that moment when you go, oh, this is the missing piece. This is what I need to know. Yeah. And so I knew, and I graduated and I said, thank you very much. Off to learn something else. Right. And so there is college in this too, but I would have to say that I got much more benefit from the certification style learning than I did from college. College was way too driven by old ideas that were already established in that system, whereas certifications are sort of on the crest of things, and they're newer and they're more abreast of change. And so I got much more out of that. And that began a career of change for my kids. One of my children is still with me. He was severely disabled and was supposed to be in an institution, and I yanked him out, and he was locked in a closet for years and his brain never developed and stuff. So he's come really far for him, but he'll probably always be with me. And the other kids have been independent and successful for years and years and years. So yeah, good work. And I wanted to share that. And so in the process of sharing that, I started traveling abroad and doing it with families and then teaching. And I have a school of people that I work with in Lebanon, and just different things, different approaches. So that was the story of what led to my expertise in the brain. And of course, you're always learning when it comes to the brain. Speaking, I was thinking about it, I don't think I became a speaker. I think I was always a speaker.
Ooh, interesting.
When I was 8 was the first time I took a lectern or went on up to the podium, and that was in church, Layman Sunday, and I gave my first sermon, which I would call my first speaking engagement. And so I don't think I remember doing it a lot in school. I remember always embracing, when I ran for social rep, I had to give speeches. There wasn't really a time, although I always dreamed of being a speaker. What I didn't recognize is I was dreaming of being what I already was, right? It's just about how do you package that and develop that in a way that you feel comfortable calling yourself a speaker. But I was already doing it, even when I was, working with my children and trying to get them camp for the summer, for example, and I couldn't afford it because I was a single mom with all these crazy kids, right? I did that by exchanging skills. I said, I'll speak to your group. I was talking to the Lions organization, and I said, I'll speak to your group if you let my kids go to camp in exchange. And then that worked so well. They were so impressed by my speaking that I then did that for Big Brothers. I did that for a lot of organizations and did it for schools. And when, my speech at the time was about, I adopted them to be a mom, not a secretary for you. Right? So I don't remember ever not speaking. It just kept changing shape until one day I went, you know what? I need to charge enough for this that I don't have to do it so often that I lose touch with the children that began the story, and started to think of it as a business. But I was always a speaker.
That's a really good problem to have, is you got so many gigs that you have to increase your speaking fee to limit the amount of gigs you're booked up for. That is a very...
No, my funnel's always been upside down. So in the same way that I did this with my brain rehab business as well. I went, wait a minute. I have all these kids and this huge mortgage. I'm living in California. I need to make this much money. So therefore, I can't start small and build and build and build and overwork to the point where I'm not making enough money and I'm not with my kids. I have to start high. I have to charge a lot. And in that process, I have to be worth it, or I'll only charge a lot once and nobody will hire me back.
Right.
So I started high, but I was also older, right? I wasn't a young person trying to make my way. I had rubber to the road in these other areas of life. And I think that makes a difference. I did the math. I said, how much do I have to make? I added a little so I could put some away. And I started there, both at speaking and at neurofeedback. And then I went, now how do I make that so special that I'm worth it? And that's how it began. So I didn't have too many gigs. I had too many kids and too many bills. And I started with answering that question first.
That is really interesting. I've never heard of a speaker do that. I find that very interesting. For you, after you made that decision, you obviously had a motivation that was, it's this or I can't provide for my kids. I don't think there's a stronger motivation for any human than that.
Right.
So it was like, it's this or there's nothing else. I need to do this. What did you do after you made that decision to say, okay, now I know my product. Now I know my cost, what I charge. Now I got to find people to buy it. How did you go on that journey of landing your first few speaking gigs after you had done a few or a lot of free events at Lions Club and maybe Rotary, that kind of thing?
Well, the two fields sort of fed each other, and which is very common when you're an expert, right? So, for example, I came up with ways of not being expensive while still making money. So, for example, what I did was I said, if you can't afford my fees as a neurofeedback person coming into your home and teaching you how to work with your child, with play, with behavioral techniques, and with biofeedback, then what I'll offer you is I'll bring my books and I'll speak if you put on a talk, and whatever money you make, you can apply that to pay my fees for neurofeedback. So what I did was I maintained this level of expense while still giving myself away in a sense. And then every April, because I specialized in autism, addiction, abuse, every April, because it's the autism month and sexual abuse month, I would say, okay, I'll speak for free this month, but you have to book me now, right? So I had times where I could sort of put myself out there where I didn't have to be expensive, and ways where I was expensive, but I was free on the talk, but expensive on the neurofeedback. So I partnered them, and I did workshops for people that wanted to learn how to do neurofeedback for the biofeedback for the brain on special needs people and that sort of thing. And so I would do those workshops, and I would pipe that through the places where I educated originally, because they all knew already that I was having tremendous effects, tremendous results. And it was word of mouth. I didn't really have to do much about that. And I made a one-woman show. I created a one-woman show, and I sang and I danced, because I used to do stand-up comedy and stuff when I was raising the kids. So I thought, what would be the fastest way to get in everybody's head and get credibility, in California, especially. I thought one-woman show will do it. So I did that. So I did a lot of things.
And for you, I know a lot of speakers, they have that moment that they think, okay, I'm an expert, but I don't have a book. I'm thinking of writing a book, but I don't know if I should write a book. I don't know if it's going to take too much time. It's going to take away from my speaking. It's going to take a lot of years, maybe. How did you make the decision to say, you know what, I'm going to be an author. I'm going to write a book. I'm committed to this.
Yeah, again, I always was. I think the first book I published was before I was an expert. And I had written 3 books that I didn't publish before I got to that one, where I finally knew how to finish a book, right? And my problem is I like to write the truth. I like to write nonfiction. When I write music, that's different. When I write poetry, it's different. When I write scripts, it's different. But I was always a writer. I don't remember ever not being a writer. And when I write a book, I want to write the truth. It's just what drives me to that format is, nonfiction. And unfortunately, for the first 3 books, I didn't know how to end them, because life kept going, right? It's like, now I want to tell this part. Now I want to tell this part. And so it took some practice to get to where I could think in terms of, what does the audience need to hear? What does the reader need from me? What am I just vomiting my thoughts, or am I giving people value? So those kinds of changes had to happen for me. But the motivation to write is life eternal for me. It's just who I am. I'm probably, of all the things I am, a writer and a parent. And the rest has just been what dressed it up.
And what was the result of, how did your life change before and after publishing your first book? Or was there no change at all?
That's such an insidious thing, because I've gone places where people pull out my book and they say, tell me this part. And I'm like, I don't remember. I wrote that like 7 years ago. I probably don't even believe it anymore, right? And they'll read it to me and I'll think, wow, I'm a good writer. I said that, right? So I know lots of times that's happened to me several times. And then I get emails constantly from people that have read stuff. And just recently, my very first book, which is all on that subject, it's a sexually based odyssey of spiritual evolution, right? And it's written in sort of a poetic styling and stuff. So it doesn't really fit in with the rest. And somebody recently sent me a picture, because they had bought, it's not even published anymore, and they had bought it on eBay. And in the front cover was this, this writing up to whoever they had gifted it to before, which was, here you are for your great sexual journeys, the education you need. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. So what I'm trying to say is, you don't know how it affects you. In the same way that you don't know when you speak to an audience how you're affecting them. All you can do is your best at being who you are at the time, and trying to put that between the cover of the book in a way that will add value to someone. The rest, you just don't really know. Did it help me get booked? I think so. It certainly opened up especially in the world of autism at the time, that was my singular specialty. That changed because I work with the brain and it pretty much applies to everything. But in that beginning, I think the book did open some doors. It certainly paid some bills, because when you're at a conference and you're signing books and you're selling them, that's when you sell the most. But really, I do it for me. So I've never tracked it. And you can't tell by the sales that you make online when you look that up, because you're selling most of it at the conference, right? And you're buying it from the publisher. So I don't know. I mean, it helped, but I don't think it's the thing you want to look at to make money from or to believe it makes you credible. It is product that says, I have something important to share, and it's important to write. Beyond that, I just keep writing books because I like it. Here's my new one. Here's my new one. Here, brand new book.
What does it say? What's it called?
Oh, In Search of Teresa. So I met a woman that had multiple personalities, and I lived on her property and interviewed her. And it's actually a really special book. The first half of the book is just her story from her memories, the way she remembered it. And I wrote it in third person because you never really know what's true when you get information that way. And then the second half of the book is me as a neurotherapist trying to figure out how to help her and what really happened.
Interesting.
Yeah. And actually, in the end, she had early onset dementia. She didn't even have multiple personalities. She was misdiagnosed.
Interesting. Now, you mentioned that. I've heard this could be totally fake, but I'm really curious to kind of tap into your expertise here. Someone said dementia and Alzheimer's. You could also call that type 3 diabetes.
Okay, that's a commercial that's going around right now, and it shows up on YouTube all the time.
Tell me about that. Is it true? Is it fake? Where do you kind of sit on that statement I just made there?
Okay, I think that because dementia is quite a big umbrella term, and this particular person has Alzheimer's, which is a type of dementia, not the umbrella term, but a type of dementia. And there's different kinds of dementia, and even a type of Parkinson's, a Lewy bodies thing, can have a form of dementia, and many things do. So when you have a problem with your sugar and your insulin, it definitely affects how your brain functions. And it's really easy to point to things and say, this is it, and sell a product. And I think what you're seeing is mostly product sales. Gotcha. It doesn't mean it's not true that there is some basis in fact there, but I wouldn't call it that. I would say that that's just a way of selling some product and getting people to, although, if you have a sugar insulin issue, you should address it. So, because it will affect your thinking.
I know my grandma, she's got pretty strong Alzheimer's. And the one time I heard him and kind of saw some tears in his eyes when he was talking about his mom with Alzheimer's, I said, so when was the last time you kind of cut through to her and you saw, that's my mom? He said, well, it wasn't something she said, Ryan. It was the last time I visited her and spoke with her. When she said bye to me, she kissed me on the cheek the same way she would kiss me on the cheek when I was going to school when I was a little kid. When I was, 10 years old. And that's how I know she's still in there. So it brings the question, what is the cause of Alzheimer's and dementia? And then are there ways to prevent it? Like I've heard things about autophagy from, fasting, all these kinds of things that there's a lot of information on the internet, but what do you know about it? And what would you kind of tap into with your expertise that would give people more insight to say, hey, I see this in my family. I do not want this. I want to do anything I can do. I want to be a polyglot, learn 6 different languages. If this is what I got to do to, delay that or however that works, what guidance would you give for that person?
You kind of just answered it, actually. Of all the things that we learn, it's, first of all, movement, super important. You don't want to be a sedentary person, because sedentary people don't move their brain. Right? So your body and your brain are one thing. I know we talk about them separate, but they're not. It's all one system. And if you're moving your body and trying new things, and maybe you take yoga, then you take Tai Chi, then you take, aerial yoga, then you take, you keep learning things. Maybe you go take a salsa dance class. Maybe you try hiking. If you're constantly, especially doing new things and moving your body, you're probably going to offset that. You can actually, if you catch dementia in its early phases, very often you can reverse the process.
Wow. Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
And it's done by, proper diet, constant movement, learning. And so when you said, I'm going to do everything I can, and learn all these languages and stuff, in fact, that's for time, ever since we discovered Alzheimer's and dementia, the studies have said people who learn a lot, who have a very varied life, are less likely to get it. So you already answered the question. Your instinct was, I don't want this, so I'm going to keep learning. I'm going to keep my brain limber. Well, it's a reality. And then, of course, food. And if you have diabetes, maybe you check on that. And if all those things are really, they're problematic. If you do the studies and you look at it and how many people have diabetes and dementia, that's kind of where some of that comes from. So good health habits will take you a very long way. That being said, there's this senior citizens place that had such good records that they decided to do. And actually there's, I think, 60 Minutes documentary, part 1 and part 2 on this, where they do a follow-up. And, they look at all these people with great longevity and great health records, and they do all these examinations. And at first they start to think they have some answers, right? Like, it's good to have a little bit of extra weight when you're older, and it's good. They start gathering some answers and they're excited. And that show ends. And then I don't know how many years later, they go back and they check and they go, actually, we know less than we thought we knew. So in the end of the day, just live your best life and live an interesting life, one that motivates you and is fun. And we all die. We all, start to deteriorate, and it's just part of life.
Are you familiar with the, I don't know, call them author, speaker, thought leader, Joe Dispenza?
Oh, sure. I met him actually. He was
way.
in Sleep, and I think he had a crush on my daughter. He kept hugging her. But I'm like, oh, no, you don't. She's married. Off we go. Yeah. I know who he is.
And do you know who Jim Quick is? Maybe?
No, I don't know that.
So Jim Quick, he's I guess you call him a brain coach. I don't know what the correct term is, but he got started and he actually wrote a book. I think it was called Limitless. But now these days, he's the brain coach of, Elon Musk's children and a lot of top level people that, they're very knowledgeable. He got started because when he was 5 in kindergarten, there was a fire truck going outside of the road, and all the kids, you're in kindergarten, you hear this big loud noise. What do? You run towards it. You're so excited. You want to see what it is. Mm-hmm. So everyone gets up and goes to the window, but he was kind of short back then. Shorter than the average student in the class. So everyone went to the window and he couldn't push through and kind of see. So he pulled up a chair and got on top of the chair to go see it and look over people to see the fire truck. And as he was getting up on the chair, he tripped and fell over. And at age 5, he had a traumatic brain injury. And that, I guess, offset him for his entire high school and college career, where he had to learn different ways to learn, not necessarily the languages, but the content of the education that he was being taught in a way that he could understand it and that helped him. And that kind of put him on the path to become who he is today with what he does. But this stuff is really interesting to me. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think about Joe Dispenza, what he teaches, all this kind of stuff? And you have much more hands-on experience with, your kids and how you raise them and all that kind of stuff. So just kind of, how do you put the puzzle all together? I want to hear your knowledge from where you're coming from.
Okay. And in regards to what you just shared, I remember discovering at one point, or having it come to my realization, I didn't discover it, it's been around forever, but that people tend to really be motivated and make change in the world based on the problems that they face. Somebody whose wife died of breast cancer opens a breast cancer foundation, somebody else, and so we find ourselves feeling like, I had multiply handicapped kids. I came from a childhood of abuse. I had many brain injuries myself. So, we tend to take this problem and either collapse into it or decide to make something of ourselves and create a benefit out in the world. So it has this feeling that we should have bad times, that we should, these challenges are good. And yes, if it wasn't for those challenges, what would happen? We wouldn't have any motivation. And I was watching Whoopi Goldberg talk recently, and I thought, oh, wow, finally, somebody that everyone's actually paid attention to all these years is saying it. She had an idyllic childhood. Her childhood was good, and she ended up iconic. So you don't have to have come from some horrible situation, and you don't have to have been rich. You just are who you are and decide whether you're going to move forward in life with the raw material of what you were given or you don't. But I don't like it when, because us speakers tend to go, and I was from this and then I'm this now, right? That's sort of the formulaic speaking style is first I was homeless under a bridge and now I'm rich, like that whole journey thing. I don't want people to get the idea that misery is a good idea, that it's a teacher. No, you're a self-learner who's experiencing misery and turning it into a lesson. And you can do that in good times too. It doesn't have to be awful. As far as the answer to the question with Joe Dispenza and what they're teaching, the thoughts become things. It's actually, I was looking at, you send a list of a couple questions you might ask. And I thought, what do I want to give it that last question there? And we're there now. This is kind of where I wanted us to end up, which is interesting, synchronicity and all that. I think it's really important when you're a speaker. It's not just thought becomes things. It's what you speak on stage becomes you. Yes, you're speaking in order to teach, right? But the real student is you. And as a result of that, in my career, I keep changing, which limits how often you're booked, by the way. People like it when they know exactly what you'll do on stage and you do it the same every single time. And that's okay. You can charge more the other way, so it balances out. But for a while, for example, I was speaking a lot on surviving and making something good out of having been through rape or incest or any of these things. And I was teaching to the brain health of it and the hormonal issues that boys have with testosterone. And it was there's a lot to be taught there. And I could write encyclopedias on it. But it was keeping me from putting it 100% in my past. Every time I went on stage with this story, I had the story.
Interesting.
And so, yes, I was teaching how to move beyond it, but not moving beyond it by teaching it. And so there was a place where I had to go, okay, that's not what I want for my future generations. It's not what I want everyone to keep hearing from me. It's not the pattern I want to keep bringing. And hopefully I've given enough out there already that somebody else can do that, because I'm not going to do it anymore. And I can say that for many things that I've done on stage where I went, you know what? Talking about that particular brain challenge is keeping it in my family. It's keeping it in my world. Or talking about the educational system in this way is keeping it in this sort of negative cycle. So even though I'm always uplifting, and I always give advice at the end that takes you to a better place, I have to every time go back to the beginning and speak on the journey, right? So I just wanted a new journey. And many times I've remade myself many times. And I think it's important to know this, that if you follow the typical funnel, know what you're getting into, because you will always be there in that place. And so, yes, I think thoughts become things, but more than that, I think what you teach becomes you.
And then for what he did with your knowledge of neurofeedback, meditating his way out of paralysis, how do you analyze that with your knowledge set and kind of apply those kinds of things to people you help with the brain knowledge you have?
Okay, so there's many kinds of paralysis, by the way, and there's conversion disorder. And there's, for example, I know a woman who was gang raped. We're not supposed to say the R word, so you can bleep it or whatever, in college. And she was paralyzed from the waist down for 7 years. And then one day went ahead and had the memory. and then could walk, and now does like the splits and all this stuff in her show. So I'm using her as an example because I want people to understand that the brain really is a magnificent tool, but it works for you or against you, depending on whether you're trying to hide from your truth, grow your truth, face your truth, and also structural damage. So you can make a lot of change in your body from your brain. And meditation is a brain tool, but it becomes a body tool, right? Your breathing gets organized, your thoughts get clear, your vagus nerve is strongly affected. Your vagus nerve is very connected with, I've helped people who were paralyzed in a very deep way where the spinal cord is completely severed, and help them use their vagus nerve to have sex, because otherwise they really couldn't operate there. And so there are ways around. And what the brain does is fascinating. It works around a problem if you let it, if you're not reinforcing. So let's look at what I was saying about being on stage. If I go on stage all the time and I keep telling the same story, I'm always speaking my same story, then I'm constantly reinforcing in myself, not necessarily the audience. I may have given them a great speech that led them out of the problem, but I'm doing this stage after stage. And so I'm reinforcing in myself this, you go to the beginning and you do this circle, you go to the beginning and I'm giving myself a pattern. Well, that creates body problems, all kinds of thinking problems. It creates patterns in your life and in your behavior. And so you want to pay attention to that. Could he fix his paralysis with meditation? In certain circumstances, absolutely. So why doubt it? And that's putting on the limitations of science. If you start adding quantum physics, which he does, there are no limitations. Point is, it can happen. It does happen. Lucky him.
And now kind of going back to speakers, I dove into that because it's very personally interesting to me, and I think some of our listeners as well. For once you got from 0 to 1, you became a speaker, you were speaking, and you wrote your book. How did you tactically go from 1 to 10 to be the speaker you are today, however many gigs you're doing per month, getting the speaking fee you're doing, and all that kind of stuff? What did you do to get there?
Well, I kind of answered that a little bit already when I said I married it with my expertise. Let me describe what I do. I go into people's homes. I teach the parents how to help their challenged person, or I teach the children how to help their challenged parent, or depending on the circumstance. But in the beginning, I was mostly working with autism. I wrote a book about autism and about this process and about my children's journey. And I was already traveling to families and teaching them how to do this. So in every single home, I was taking the stage. I was teaching. So speaking is teaching. It's just to a larger group. And very quickly, people are inviting people over and they're asking me it just sort of was a natural word of mouth evolution. I never really noticed, until, retroactively you look back at things, I never really noticed the degree to which that actually held up my speaking. I was always doing it. So there was never any nerves or worry or feeling that I couldn't do it. I just felt like this is going to take 75 million lifetimes doing this family by family. I need to speak to more people at once in order to really share what I know. And what I know is pretty special. I'm pretty unique. I don't know anyone else who adopted this multiply handicapped kids and had this life that I had and then did these classes that I did. So I wanted to be able to share in a larger way. And so I started adding that as, if you can't afford me, here's a way to afford me, that, word of mouth. Plus I was going to conferences and I was learning about speaking at the same time. And I was making partnerships with people and they're saying, I'll speak on your stage, you'll speak on my stage. And I never had a plan. I just had an intention and followed it. But I did have a book. And I did have an expertise, and I did already have the experience of constantly speaking. So it was just about sitting down and going, oh, I should turn this into a thing. And when I did it for the biofeedback conferences, there'd be people sitting in the aisles. Like, I was entertaining. I have stand-up comedy in my background, a one-woman show in my background. I have I was an actress raising my kids. I'm fun on stage, right? So all the other boring people I'm like, okay, so how do you write it? It was kind of a natural. I guess the cleanest answer I can give you is the one-woman show. As far as how did I make it a thing, right? Where I intentionally did it, I went, I need to do a one-woman show. Then people are used to seeing me on stage and I'll get lots of exposure. So I think that was probably the big thing that really got it started. But I'd already written it just sort of evolved. I think that successful people evolve. You are where you are, you know what you want to be, you look at what you're doing, what's natural to you, and you find your skill there. I naturally want to help people with their behavior and with their emotions, and that's who I've been all my life. So I'm not trying to become someone I'm not. I'm just trying to become better and more of what I already am.
Let's say a listener here is listening and they're thinking, dang, what she's saying is so freaking valuable. Where can I find her on the internet to carry a little mini version of Lynette in my pocket? Where can they find you?
Well, I have a YouTube channel and I have websites. So LynetteLouise.com, brainbody.net. I have 2 YouTube channels. One's more my acting stuff and one's more the brain stuff. Fix It in 5 is a series that I'm always doing. I can never get it done. It takes so much effort and money, but it shows me at work. And so if you're on my YouTube channel, which I don't remember what it's called, but I'm pretty sure if you put Lynette Works with Autism, you'll find examples of me working on my husband died, so on his channel, which I can't seem to move over. And on my channel, you'll find Fix It in 5 and stuff. So I think just Google me. I'm pretty findable.
Any social medias? That's your main place if someone wants to send you a message and ask you a question?
Well, to be perfectly honest with you, I have my daughter do all that because I'm pretty sick of social media. But if somebody asks me a question, she'll tell me, and then I'll tell her the answer and she'll give it to you. I guess it's called now, and Facebook and LinkedIn, and my Instagram was hacked and I haven't bothered caring about it.
Gotcha. Last question for you. From all of your years of building this identity, this brand, helping all these people, growing into becoming the woman you are today, what knowledge would you want to give to the aspiring speaker, the professional speaker, or the entrepreneur that speaks to grow their business that maybe solves some problems that they will have that they are just not sure they're going to have yet?
I actually asked myself this question before you started the podcast. It's what I do before every speaking engagement. No matter what I said I would deliver as a speaker, I always stand at the back of the room and watch everybody speak and listen to what I think was a misdirection or a good direction, something to build on, something that seemed a problem for the audience, and try to incorporate that into what I'm going to say. I don't write my speaking first. I plan it in blocks like I used to as a comedian. So I know what I want to say, but I don't script it because then I get nervous and I suck. But also that I'm not flexible. So with that in mind, I think the greatest gift would be, well, there's a few things. One, start speaking before you hit the stage. So, come from the back of the room or start talking from behind stage, even though nobody's hearing you until you turn your mic on or whatever. Don't wait till you're out there center stage and go, right? Be speaking, be in the personality, be in the place. But really, I already touched on, I think, the most important part, which is you will become, not just for others, but for yourself, what you speak about. And I suggest an annual revamp on that. Like, just have a look at it. Do you want to be this person you're becoming? Do you want to be stuck on the gerbil wheel of I have to speak all the time on this subject? I'm so sick of it and I don't like what it's doing to me, but the money matters. Money always comes. Money always comes if you believe it will. It just does. Let that go and just care about your own evolution. I was talking to my daughter today and we were laughing that when I was early as an entrepreneur and I used to be afraid there wouldn't be money for the bills, and often I'd get down to zero and then all of a sudden there'd be money. And we were laughing about it. Like, we don't wake up in the morning and go, is the floor still there? Is the floor still there? Is the floor still there? I have to manifest the floor. I have had money show up so many times that at some point I just gonna know money's gonna come. Let it go. It's there. And just receive it and move on. But watch who you are turning yourself into and make sure you want to be that.
Well, if you guys are listening here and you found what Lynette shared valuable, and you have a friend or a colleague that's a speaker that you think needs to know that message that she said, what you speak on stage becomes you, or anything she said that you think might be that little knowledge nugget that could be that one thing they needed to hear to add this one pivot to their business or their speaking career or their personal development that might be exactly what they need. Go ahead and give us a share for them. Lynette, thanks for taking the time to do this. And guys, thank you for listening. Cheers, y'all.
Thanks for having me.